Hello, my name is Mikael Hellström. I am the GM of this campaign, and I'd like to briefly introduce you to the concept because this is something I haven't done before, and it's fairly unique and it's very interesting design. This is, as you will see in the titles, it's the Oracle's Four Eyes, which is the second part of a four-part fantasy campaign that was written by Mr. Eric Granström in Sweden for a Swedish role-playing game back in the late 80s and early 1990s. It's four parts, I said, and the first part was called Sulphur Winter, and that story took four player characters: a knight, his trusty servants, a dwarf, a wolfman, and an elf, to a small island that is northwest of this map, about 4 weeks straight sailing. And they were questing to that island to find the knight's long-lost brother. The brother had joined a strange cult called the Shagolites, and the brother, and they were supposed to bring him back. And what happened during that time? A lot of things, because there are a lot of adventures on that island, which is kind of this world's equivalent to Iceland. And it ended up with the Shagolite sect that the brother joined being destroyed. Also, the brother died. And a group of restless dead rising and taking over the island, which was a terrible blow for this country, the Orion Empire, because about a third of the revenue to the royal coffers were cut off when they lost the island. And that's where that particular story ended. And a downtime started until we got to the Oracle's Four Eyes. And that is where this game went from being a straight tabletop camp to become much more interwoven with a board game at the same time. So Tracoria is an empire, the setting, that the empire where the story is set is a place that is rife with conflict. There are nobles and merchants and soldiers and sorcerers. All of them have their own agendas, their own motivations, and reason to be engaged in the power-mongering and trying to achieve their own motivations, and they clash with each other and make alliances and so on, as it should be in any game of high political intrigue. Now, I didn't want to keep track of all those motivations myself, and the game system that was published by the Free League, those of you in countries outside of Scandinavia might know of the Free League through games like Mutant Year Zero, Coriolis, or Tales from the Loop. So the Free League designed the system that we're using, called Sulphur Winter, after the first installment of the campaign. And this system incorporates this bouncing between a board game and an ordinary tabletop experience with players around the table. Now, the straight version of the board game, of this design in the Free League system, is that the players around the table also are the board gamers, and they sort of shift between acting as one of the big power holders and then acting as their player characters. I haven't designed it this way. Instead, I've allowed the players who play player characters to take on one of the power holders called Shadow Actors, but I've also involved a whole bunch of other people. So we have 9 board gamers who are not doing, most of them, not doing any playing as player characters, and they are on 2 continents, these players, and as the narrative progresses through the calendar days of this setting, they do their board game moves, and they move their resources, and they do battle with each other, and so on and so forth. And thus they create the narrative, a whole lot of the plot for me, because that way they will create that authenticity, because they have the perspective and motivations of each of these power holders. So during the sessions that you will listen to and watch on this channel, you will be able to follow how the effects of that board game, the effects of what happens when the high and mighty pursue their separate interests. Sometimes they will help the player characters, and sometimes they will hinder them, and sometimes they will even try to kill them. The players have caught on to that and are keeping their eyes peeled for who happens to be a power in this particular region. So it's a very good way of creating a very rich and authentic experience, I find. So let me introduce you to this world. The main island of the Orion Empire is Paratorna, where the capital is. This island is populated by the Paratornians, and they worship the goddess Castique, the goddess of profit. As such, they worship her in a particularly devout fashion. That means that they will do profit by any means necessary, and that often means milking everyone else as much as they can. They love opulence, and they're very arrogant, and one of their cultural traits is whoever insults someone else best wins. And that's not very much appreciated by anyone else. And so most of the other peoples of the empire do not like them at all. But it is the most powerful island of the four. Paulomoc is the second largest island. It used to be the seat of the empire that preceded Tricoria, called the Clavikian Empire, but no longer. That empire crumbled. The most powerful entity on Paulomoc now is the Holy Kishat, the theocracy that is very anti-Tricorian. This is also where you'll find the upstart noble, the Prince of Folda, who has spread his powers throughout the realms. And yes, both of these factions are playable factions by the board gamers. So Fina is the breadbasket of the empire. The people here are quite friendly, make excellent ales, and it is said that the soil here is so rich that the people don't really need to make bread out of their seeds here. They could just eat the soil straight up. It has a couple of impassable areas, the Tokma Forest, which is very dense and is practically impassable because of the peculiar flora, and Crindenland, which is a magical area where mountains move and light quakes abound. Nobody can enter without being harmed in some fashion. Trismuir is the final island. The barbarians of the Rungli Mountains have held out against the Tricorians for a long time. But the Tricorians are very much interested in the ore of the Himbragon Massive, and have occupied this area with a lot of very merciless troops that every once in a while trigger a rebellion. For now, it is peaceful, but during the downtime, there was quite the fight up here. And finally introducing you to the Shadow Actors. So these are the powers that be, and you'll find that there's a whole bunch of different types here. The Inquisitors of the Animus Absolva are mostly interested in protecting the gods' creations. So they're loyal to the gods. This is a polytheistic world. And they fight the anti-creationists wherever they can find them. Of course, they decide who is anti-creationist. And there is also the theocratic rule of Manzonla, the Crystallocrat, of the Holy Kishat that I've mentioned before. You'll also find old family nobles, conservative nobles who want to preserve their old privileges and the old ways of life on Paratorna. Against these old-style nobles, there is a group of upstarts called the Order of the New Sphere, dedicated to the glory of the goddess Castique. 3 of the shadow actors are in that particular group. That's Commodore Caldor, which is a pirate king, if you will, pirate lord. Go by the Grumi of the Tracorian Secret Service, and the Duke. Another group is the Apothecaries Guild, the Defaults, who are suspected of being anti-creationist by the Inquisitors. They hold power on the northern part of Paratorna. And then you have a whole bunch of other types of people. The upstart noble Folda, some independence fighters, a witch, the merciless mercenary Garagormgald, and so on. So together, they create a lot of story. I'm very pleased with this dynamic, and I think that the story that's coming out of this is quite rich, and I hope that you will enjoy the way I do.